welcome. I'm Rachel. This week we are recommending books with a focus on poetry to celebrate Poetry Month in April. So, Amanda, do you get into poetry and verse much?
Yes, not so much poetry. I mean, I do read some poetry when it comes out, especially like Kwame Alexander when he releases stuff. I'm always like, yes, because it's just some people can write poetry really, really well that make it engaging and feel like you're reading like a story. But I'm more of a novel and verse girly. And so when they can take a story and break it down with lots of white space for my students, but also choose their words so carefully to where they are still telling a very impactful story. I just absolutely adore it. I always use novel and verse with graphic novels to kind of for that bridge between picture books and novels for kids who don't feel like they like to read very thick books with lots of words, And so I love that it's so accessible to all kinds of readers. And
It
you?
really is. It's really accessible. I always recommend verse for those who, whatever you want to call them, some people call them struggling readers. The people who are more reluctant to pick up a book would rather be on their phones or do something else. I
Yeah.
think in this generation of, rapid fire entertainment with TikTok, they need shorter, quicker reads. So the graphic novels and the books in verse are great for them. And I'm just like you. I have a hard time with the poetry. I never feel like I quite get it, so to speak. Like I just am not that smart, I guess. But the verse I can get because there is a story. It's not just, really pretty words that I'm trying to make meaning of. So I tend to go towards the verse as well. So what is your first pick? I'm assuming it's a book in verse.
It is. I actually read this one back in November as an advanced reader's copy. It is Mid-Air by Alicia D Williams. And I absolutely love Alicia D Williams. This is her sophomoric novel. And so I loved so much of the way she wrote her first book that I just had to get my hands on this one immediately when I saw it. Also, the cover is very striking. You'll notice that it looks almost like a watercolor painting, and it's just catching someone in movement. It is a middle grade novel in verse, and it has very gorgeous illustrations, just like the cover does. I will say that when I say middle grade, generally I'm talking third through sixth, fourth through seventh. In this case, I would say it's fifth and up due to some of the content warnings, which I'll share in a little bit, but it does deal with Black Lives Matter movement, police brutality, and toxic masculinity. And I feel like so many of our kids nowadays are struggling with what it's like to be a man and what they need to how they need to act, how they need to react to things. So I felt like it really did a deep dive into that topic as well as grief and loss because it does deal with those topics. So it's a very timely book, but it also does have some heavy topics that unfortunately our kids are going through. And I always tell people that, I recommend these books because, we don't know what our kids are dealing with and what they're struggling with and what their experiences are. And if our job as librarians is to make sure every kid sees themselves on a shelf, then I need to have books that represent all the different experiences. And so this one really did a great job with doing handling the characters and the grief that they go through, as well as just like trying to live their life and be a kid. And that can be really, really hard sometimes. This book isn't out until April 23rd. So definitely make sure to get your hands on it, borrow it from the library. It deals with some content warnings are going to be death, car accident, physical attack, toxic masculinity, misogyny, imprisonment, police brutality, parental abandonment, and grief.
Wow, that sounds heavy, but it sounds like it's going to be a good one. So I'll have
Yeah,
to look
good
out for
one.
that one. My first pick actually is a legit poetry book. This is my absolute favorite poetry collection I've ever come across. It's called I Hope This Finds You Well by Kate Baer. This poet in this particular book, and she does this a lot of times on her social media, she takes these mean-spirited negative comments that you hear about all the time with social media that a lot of people experience, and she basically recrafts them into her response. And it's kind of like a blackout poetry or a found poem, depending on how you want to call it. But it's just absolutely awesome to see like the before comment and then the after she bleeps out the words she doesn't need and just has left what she wants to say back. It's phenomenal. I think this is just amazing. I think due to some of the comments and just some of the themes of the comments, maybe more for more mature readers, I would say probably 10th grade and up just to be safe. But I think this is just amazing. I read this every once in a while, just take one down and read a couple. If you haven't heard of Kate Baer, I would highly suggest heading over to her social media and just reading a few of them to get a taste for them. But if you're not sure about poems, this is where I would start because it's fantastic. And this would work for the nonfiction category for sure.
That is so interesting. You find like these like super niche books that I just have never heard of. I love that.
But I loved it. I just came across her on social media, and because I think one of my friends posted one of these poems, and I'm like, this is insane. I absolutely love this.
That's so neat. I think that that would definitely resonate with our teens that are dealing with all kinds of social media issues for them to take something negative and turn it into a positive. So I love that. My second book is Gone Wolf by Amber McBride. Amber McBride in the past has been an only novel in verse author, right? If you've read Me Moth or We Are Dreaming, something, I can't remember the title, but oh no, We're Always Smiling. We're not smiling, something like that. Anyway, her books are phenomenal. And Me Moth, I think, won the National Book Award or was a finalist because she is such an impactful writer. And the other books that she'd written before were young adult. And the one I'm going to discuss today is actually middle grade. Half of the book is about inmate 11, and it is set in the future where she is this girl called a Blue because her skin is blue, and she is locked in a tiny prison cell with her wolf dog. And it just kind of deals with her perspective. This is the way in the future, so lots of things of that nature, like futuristic components, but it's more about why is she blue? Why is she treated different from the other people and clones and things like that? Then we switch to a second half point of view that is set during the pandemic. And it's about a girl that is struggling to deal with the pandemic and loss of someone in her family because of the pandemic. So wow, this book was incredibly impactful. So I picked two pretty serious topics for this month, but I tend to find with poetry that always is the case for me. The novels and verse I pick up usually have very serious, heavy things going on. This one is for fans of The Probability of Everything, and I love that book too, Sarah Everett. And then Dear Martin by Nick Stone. So they deal with a lot of different topics, very serious topics. This isn't one I would give to a middle grade reader and just be like, enjoy. Like, this is one that I felt like needs to be walked through them. There are a lot of there's a lot of deep discussion that can come from this book that you may not get if you're doing just a pleasure read. So this one's great for book clubs, whole class novels. Some of the things it deals with are slavery, enslaved people, racism, anxiety, agoraphobia, death of siblings, police brutality, murder, death of a pet, and COVID themes. So, like I said, there's a lot going on in it, but I mean, wow. And if you have read this one, please message me because I have a lot of thoughts and I would love to talk to you about them. So if you've read Gone Wolf, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
Amanda, while you were talking, I thought of a book that I can't believe neither one of us recommended for Poetry Week, and that's Ain't Bird All the Bright by Jason Reynolds, illustrated by Jason Griffin. So I knew you'd second this one.
Yes, I love that book. It's actually right here on my desk. I would recommend.
Amazing.
Yes. And also he wrote Long Way Down, which is a great novel in verse, and For Everyone, which I always want to buy a copy for every graduating senior and give them for everyone as they head out into the world, because it's just It's so good. It's so good. Like everything Jason writes. Like literally, we could do a whole episode on Jason Reynolds. When are we doing that?
Oh,
Because
let's add that. Let's add that.
because I could talk about him forever. But yes, Ain't Burned All the Bright is so interesting because it's like mixed media. It
Yes.
has the artwork that other Jason created, and it has Jason Reynolds' beautiful words with it. So highly recommend that one as well.
Absolutely. And that would be more young adults.
Yeah.
You might be able to consider that either poetry or graphic novel or nonfiction if you'd like to read that one for your board. All right, and my second pick is To Stay Alive by Skila Brown. I'm always down for a story about the infamous Donner Party, which, if you're not familiar, is a group who was on the Oregon Trail who got trapped, and a lot of dark things happened. So I loved this in verse. I think sometimes the verse is overdone. So just because the book is in verse, I'm not always a fan, but this is what verse was made for because it was like a whole nother layer to the book. You're reading from one point of view of one of the girls on the trip. And because it's in this poetry form, I mean, it literally would give me chills. It is now just thinking back about it because I don't know how to explain it. Just going from the prose to the verse form just really did change the level of it. And you're going through all of her experiences of all the things that happened on the Donner Party. And like I said, chills. I highly recommend it if you're into things like the Donner Party. If you're not, though, because it is very dark, trigger warnings for starvation, cannibalism, all the other dark stuff. I literally wrote that in our notes, dark stuff. So just heads up on that. But if you're ready for that, then I highly recommend To Stay Alive by Skila Brown. It's fantastic. One of my favorite books. And this would be good for historical fiction or YA.
Yeah, I do. It's weird that we're kind of into like these dark things, like, but I feel like as a society we are. How many people have been watching true crime documentaries on Netflix lately? Like my kids are asking for it. They want to delve into these darker themes and really kind of explore that part of the human, like what makes us do things like that. And so I'm I'm actually wanting to read this one too. That sounds
It's interesting. It just is to go back and experience something that, other people have. I think it really does. Again, it builds the empathy. It kind of brings us together as a community, as a species or whatever, to get a little deep on you. But it's always interesting to go back in history and be able to relate to people who lived forever ago.
yeah.
With the Titanic, that was like 100 years ago or more at this
Mhm.
point, and we can still relate to those people. I think that's fascinating. So same thing here. This was a really long time ago.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter. Kids are still, I mean, World War II books are still flying off my shelf, and we want to go over things in history so that we don't repeat them. And so we want to have our students learning about these topics and things like that. And for those of you, like I like how you said that it's like not every book is for verse, like isn't, like not just because it's in verse doesn't necessarily mean it's like the most amazing book ever. With Gone Wolf, it very much has novel in it, and then it also has verse in it. So I like when books kind of defy genre or type, and I felt like we have some on the list this week, and I think every week. You pick great ones that defy genre or type or or format. And so I like that we're giving readers all these different options of what they can choose when they check out books. So
Absolutely. There's all kinds of books out there for everybody. That's why I always tell the kids we don't like the same books. That's why there's not only like 5 books on the shelf. There's all kinds of books for everybody. And those are our recommendations for the week. If you would like to share your recommendations or request a theme to be highlighted in a future show, reach out on social media at Books and Bingos or email us at booksandbingos@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and join us again next week for floral cover recommendations to celebrate spring. Happy reading!